October 14th, 1066. The morning mist clings to the hills of East Sussex as two armies face each other across a blood-soaked field. On one side stands Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England, his battle-worn warriors forming an impenetrable shield wall. On the other, William of Normandy, soon to be known as the Conqueror, commands a force of Norman knights, their horses pawing the ground, eager for the charge that will decide the fate of a nation. In just a few hours, one of these men will be dead, his body mutilated beyond recognition. The other will claim a crown that will transform England forever. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. The battle that's about to unfold shouldn't have happened at all. 3 weeks earlier, Harold had already won what many considered the greatest victory of his reign. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he's about to fight for his life in a battle that will echo through 1,000 years of history. This is the story of how a single arrow, or was it a sword, ended a dynasty that had ruled England for centuries, and how a bastard duke from Normandy became one of history's most feared conquerors. But to understand why this battle changed everything, we need to go back to where it all began. Edward the Confessor lies dying in his royal chamber. The king who has ruled England for over 2 decades draws his final breaths, and with them, he takes the stability of his kingdom to the grave. No direct heir, no clear succession, just whispered promises and competing claims that will soon drench English soil in blood. But Edward's death isn't just the end of a reign. It's the lighting of a fuse that stretches across the English Channel to Normandy, north to Norway, and deep into the heart of Anglo-Saxon England itself. 3 men believe they have legitimate claims to the English throne, and each is willing to kill for it. Harold Godwinson, Earl of Wessex, Edward's brother-in-law, and arguably the most powerful nobleman in England. The Witenagemot, England's Council of Nobles, chooses him. He's crowned king within hours of Edward's death, but legitimacy and power are 2 very different things. William of Normandy. The bastard son of Duke Robert, now Duke of Normandy himself, William claims Edward promised him the throne years earlier. More dangerously, he insists that Harold himself swore a sacred oath to support his claim, an oath sworn on holy relics, an oath that if broken, would damn Harold's soul to hell. Harald Hardrada, the towering king of Norway, whose very name means hard ruler. He bases his claim on an agreement between his predecessor and an earlier English king. At 6.5 feet tall, in an age when most men barely reached 5 feet, Harold is a giant who has spent his life conquering. England is just his latest target. The stage is set for the most brutal succession crisis in English history, but none of these 3 men know that by year's end, 2 of them will be dead, and the survivor will rule over a kingdom transformed beyond recognition. 2 years before Edward's death, a storm drives Harold Godwinson's ship onto the Norman coast. What happens next depends on who tells the story, but the consequences are undeniable. According to Norman sources, William receives Harold as an honored guest. They feast together, fight side by side in Brittany, and develop what seems like genuine friendship. Then, in a ceremony surrounded by Norman nobles, Harold places his hands on a chest containing sacred relics. Some say the bones of saints, others claim fragments of the true cross, and swears a solemn oath to support William's claim to the English throne. Harold's version? He was William's prisoner, forced to swear an oath under duress. An oath made by a man who isn't free has no validity in the eyes of God or man. But William sees it differently. To him, Harold is an oath-breaker of the worst kind, a man who has sworn on holy relics and then betrayed his sacred promise. When news reaches Normandy that Harold has been crowned King of England, William's response is swift and terrifying. He doesn't just plan an invasion, he embarks on one of medieval Europe's most sophisticated diplomatic campaigns. William sends envoys to Rome. He presents his case to Pope Alexander II, painting Harold as a usurper and oath-breaker. The Pope's response electrifies medieval Europe. He grants William a papal banner, blessing the Norman invasion as a holy war. Harold isn't just fighting for his crown, according to the Church. He's fighting against God himself. While William builds his invasion fleet in Normandy, a different threat emerges from the mists of the North Sea. Harald Hardrada's longships slice through the waves, their dragon prows promising death and conquest. The Norwegian king hasn't come alone. He's brought an army of hardened Vikings, and more dangerously, he's allied himself with Tostig Godwinson, Harold's own exiled brother. Family betrayal runs deep in the Godwinson bloodline. Tostig, once Earl of Northumbria, had been driven from England by rebellion and his brother's refusal to support him. Now he returns with foreign invaders, ready to claim by force what he believes was stolen from him. The Norwegian fleet is massive, over 300 ships, carrying perhaps 10,000 warriors. They sail up the Ouse River and destroy the English forces at Fulford Gate on September 20th. York, one of England's greatest cities, surrenders without a fight. Harold Hardrada isn't just raiding, he's conquering, city by city, preparing to march south and claim the English crown. In London, Harold receives the devastating news. The north is falling, his brother has turned traitor, and somewhere across the Channel, William is preparing his own invasion. Harold faces every medieval king's nightmare, enemies attacking from multiple directions, forcing him to choose which threat to face first. He makes a decision that will define his reign and his legacy. Harold will march north immediately, leaving the south vulnerable to Norman invasion. It's a calculated risk that shows both his strategic brilliance and his fatal weakness. Harold Godwinson is a warrior king who believes every problem can be solved with swift, decisive action. Harold's response to the Norwegian invasion becomes the stuff of legend. In just 4 days, he marches his army over 180 miles from London to Yorkshire, a feat of logistics and endurance that astounds even medieval chroniclers accustomed to remarkable military achievements. But this isn't just about speed. It's about the kind of king Harold has become. He doesn't send his generals north while remaining safely in London. He doesn't wait for reinforcements or send diplomats to negotiate. Harold Godwinson straps on his armor, grasps his battle axe, and leads from the front, just as Anglo-Saxon kings have done for centuries. The army that follows him represents the last flowering of Anglo-Saxon military tradition. His housecarls, professional warriors, sworn to die before their king march in disciplined ranks, their massive two-handed axes capable of splitting both mail and bone. Behind them come the third, ordinary Englishmen called from their farms and workshops to defend their homeland. They carry spears and shields, wear simple mail if they're lucky, and fight with the desperate courage of men defending their families. This is more than an army. It's a civilization in motion. The Anglo-Saxon world that has existed for 6 centuries, with its ancient laws, its poetry, its unique blend of Germanic tradition and Christian faith, marches north to face extinction or glory. September 25th, 1066, Stamford Bridge. The Norwegian army waits confidently on the east side of the River Derwent, their weapons and armor glinting in the autumn sun. Harold Hardrada stands over 6.5 feet tall, a giant among men, his white hair flowing beneath his helmet. 24 years of conquest have brought him to this moment. He's about to become King of England. Tostig Godwinson stands beside the Norwegian king, perhaps wondering if his brother will show mercy when the crown is won. Neither man expects what's about to happen. Harold's army appears like a storm on the western horizon. The Norwegians, caught completely off guard, watch in growing horror as thousands of English warriors deploy for battle. Harold Hardrada, the man who has never lost a major battle, realizes he's been outmaneuvered by an enemy who shouldn't even be here yet. The battle begins with single combat that becomes instant legend. A lone Norwegian warrior, wielding a massive battle axe, holds the narrow bridge against the entire English army. For precious minutes, this unnamed hero Slater, called the Berserker of Stamford Bridge, kills dozens of Englishmen, his axe rising and falling like the hammer of Thor himself. Finally, an English warrior floats beneath the bridge in a wooden tub and thrusts his spear upward through the planks, mortally wounding the Norwegian giant. It's a moment that perfectly captures the transition from the age of individual heroism to the age of tactical cunning. The real battle begins when Harold's forces cross the river. What follows is a massacre. The Norwegians, caught without their armor on a warm September day, fight desperately but hopelessly. Harold Hardrada falls early, pierced by an English arrow, his dreams of conquest dying with him. Tostig Godwinson dies beside the foreign king he chose over his own brother, the price of family betrayal paid in blood. By evening, the Norwegian threat is obliterated. Of the 300 ships that brought the invasion force to England, only 24 are needed to carry the survivors home. Harold Godwinson has won one of the most complete victories in medieval warfare. England is safe. Or so it seems. October 1st, 1066. Harold sits in York, receiving the surrender of the surviving Norwegians and accepting the submission of English nobles who had collaborated with the invaders. He has every reason to celebrate. In 3 weeks, he has marched 180 miles, won a devastating victory, and eliminated one of his 2 main rivals. The crown seems secure. Then a messenger arrives from the south, his horse lathered with sweat, his face grim with news that will change everything. "My lord," he gasps, falling to one knee, "Duke William has landed. The Normans are in England." The words hit Harold like a physical blow. While he was winning his great victory in the north, William had finally launched his invasion. Norman ships had crossed the Channel, landed at Pevensey Bay, and established a beachhead on English soil. Worse, they're not just raiding, they're building fortifications, preparing for a long campaign. Harold faces a choice that will define not just his reign, but the entire future of English civilization. He can remain in the north, consolidate his victory, gather reinforcements, and meet the Normans from a position of strength next year. Or he can do what every instinct in his warrior's heart demands: march south immediately and drive the invaders into the sea. It's the same decision-making process that brought him victory at Stamford Bridge, but this time, it might destroy him. Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king, makes the choice that seals his fate. He will march south, and he will fight. Let's pause Harold's story for a moment and see the invasion through Norman eyes, because William's landing at Pevensey Bay is one of the most audacious military operations in medieval history. All summer, William has prepared for this moment. He's not just building ships, he's creating an entire military machine. Norman carpenters construct prefabricated wooden castles that can be assembled rapidly on English soil. Blacksmiths forge thousands of arrow points, spearheads, and sword blades. Most importantly, William recruits not just from Normandy, but from across Europe. This isn't a Norman invasion. It's a cosmopolitan crusade. Bretons seek revenge for ancient defeats. Flemish knights hunt for English lands. French nobles answer the call of adventure and papal blessing. Italian mercenaries bring crossbows and tactical expertise. William has assembled perhaps the most diverse and professional army medieval Europe has ever seen. On September 28th, nearly 700 ships, carrying perhaps 10,000 men, set sail from Saint-Valery-sur-Somme. The Channel crossing that should take hours stretches through the night, as adverse winds scatter the fleet. When dawn breaks on September 29th, William's ship is alone on the English coast, his army scattered across miles of choppy water. For any other commander, this would be disaster. For William, it becomes triumph. As his scattered ships reach the English shore, he organizes one of history's most efficient amphibious landings. Within hours, Norman carpenters are assembling the prefabricated castle at Pevensey. By evening, William has established an unassailable base on English soil. But William's greatest weapon isn't his castles or his knights, it's his understanding of Harold's character. The Norman Duke knows his opponent is a warrior who will come south rapidly, probably without full preparations. William wants Harold to attack quickly, before the English king can gather his full strength. So William does something that seems contradictory. Instead of advancing inland, he stays near the coast and begins systematically devastating the countryside around Hastings. It's a brutal but brilliant strategy. Every village burned, every peasant killed, every harvest destroyed sends the same message to Harold: come south now, or watch your kingdom die piece by piece. Harold receives reports of Norman atrocities with mounting fury. This isn't just invasion tree, it's terrorism designed to force his hand, and it's working. Against the advice of his counselors, against all strategic wisdom, Harold makes the decision that will define his legacy. He will march south immediately with whatever forces he has. No waiting for reinforcements, no strategic delay. Harold Godwinson will meet William of Normandy in battle, and one of them will not survive. The march south becomes a race against time. Harold's army, still exhausted from Stamford Bridge, covers another 250 miles in just 12 days. But this march is different from the triumphant advance north. Harold's forces are depleted. Many of his best warriors lie dead on the field at Stamford Bridge. The northern Fyrds have gone home to harvest their crops, believing the war was won. Harold marches south with perhaps 7,000 men against William's 10,000, and many of his troops are newly recruited, untested in battle. Yet, Harold's speed nearly wins him the war before it begins. His advance is so rapid that he almost catches William's foraging parties off guard. If Harold had arrived just a few hours earlier, he might have surprised the Norman camp and ended the invasion with a single devastating attack. Instead, Norman scouts spot the English army just in time. William receives word that Harold is approaching. and he makes his own crucial decision. Rather than wait behind his fortifications for Harold to attack, he will advance to meet the English army in open battle. Both kings are gambling everything on a single battle. By the evening of October 13th, 1066, two armies camp within sight of each other on the hills near Hastings. Tomorrow will decide not just who rules England, but what kind of civilization England will become. Dawn breaks grey and cold over the Sussex hills. Mist clings to the valleys as two armies prepare for the battle that will reshape English history. On Senlac Hill, the Bloody Lake as the Anglo-Saxons call it, Harold deploys his forces in the traditional English formation that has protected this island for centuries. The Shield Wall. 7,000 English warriors lock their shields together in an unbroken line across the hilltop. In the front ranks stand Harold's surviving housecarls, professional warriors whose two-handed axes have never known defeat. Behind them, ranks of furred militia hold their spears ready, their faces grim with determination. At the center, Harold Godwinson plants his personal standards, the fighting man banner of Wessex and the Dragon of England itself. It's a formation that has broken every cavalry charge ever launched against it. Viking raiders, Danish kings, Celtic warriors, all have shattered themselves against the English shield wall. Harold has every reason for confidence. His position is excellent, his men are fighting for their homeland, and the enemy must attack uphill against a wall of shields and steel. But as the mist clears, Harold sees something that chills his blood. The Norman army deploying in the valley below isn't just larger than his own sits. It's completely different from anything England has faced before. William's forces advance in three distinct divisions. On the left, Breton infantry and cavalry prepare for the assault. On the right, French and Flemish knights check their weapons and horses, but it's the center that captures Harold's attention. Norman heavy cavalry, their lances gleaming, their horses trained for war, led by William himself. The Norman duke sits his war horse like a statue of conquest. His mail gleams beneath a surcoat, bearing the papal banner. Around his neck hangs a casket of holy relics, but perhaps the same relics on which Harold swore his disputed oath years before. William of Normandy has come not just as a conqueror, but as an agent of divine justice. The two armies face each other across a few hundred yards of English countryside. Neither king knows that they're about to fight the most important battle in English history. Neither realizes that the winner will create a new England, while the loser's defeat will echo through 1,000 years. At 9 in the morning, William raises his sword, and hell comes to Senlac Hill. The battle begins with a sound that the chroniclers struggle to describe, thousands of Norman archers drawing their bows simultaneously, then releasing. The air fills with arrows, a wooden rain that darkens the morning sky before crashing down onto the English shield wall. But Harold's warriors are ready, shields lock tighter, and the arrows that should devastate the English ranks mostly bounce harmlessly off wood and steel. A few men fall, but the shield wall holds. The first Norman attack has failed before it truly began. William's response shows why he's conquered half of northern France. Norman infantry advances up the hill in disciplined ranks, their shields locked, their spears leveled. Behind them, heavy cavalry waits for the moment when the English line begins to crack. The infantry assault hits the shield wall like a hammer blow. Norman spears thrust forward, seeking gaps in the English defense. English axes rise and fall, splitting shields and bones with equal ease. For brutal minutes, the two forces grind against each other, neither giving ground. Then Harold's housecarls demonstrate why they're considered the finest infantry in Europe. Their massive two-handed axes begin to take a terrible toll. Norman shields shatter, mail splits open. Men scream as English steel finds its mark. Slowly, inexorably, the Norman infantry begins to fall back. William sees his first attack failing and commits his cavalry. Norman knights spur their horses up the hill, lances couched, ready to break the English line through sheer momentum. It's the moment that should decide the battle. Heavy cavalry, the dominant military force of medieval Europe, charging uphill against infantry. The knights hit the shield wall like a thunderclap. Lances shatter against English shields. Horses rear and scream as axes bite deep. But the shield wall holds, more than holds, it destroys the cavalry charge. Norman knights, tangled among their dying horses, are pulled down and butchered by English axes. For a moment, it seems Harold has won. The Norman left wing breaks and flees down the hill in panic. English warriors, thinking the battle is over, break ranks and pursue, their victory cries echoing across the battlefield. But William of Normandy hasn't conquered half of France by accepting defeat. As his left wing collapses, he makes a decision that changes everything. He removes his helmet and rides along his wavering battle line, shouting that he's alive, that the battle isn't over. It's a moment of pure leadership that transforms disaster into opportunity. The fleeing Bretons rally, the retreating cavalry reforms, and most crucially, William sees that hundreds of English warriors have broken ranks to pursue what they thought were fleeing enemies. The Norman Duke turns disaster into tactical brilliance with a single command: feigned retreat. What happens next becomes one of the most studied tactical maneuvers in military history. Norman cavalry, instead of genuinely fleeing, begins a controlled withdrawal designed to draw more English warriors away from their defensive position. It's incredibly dangerous. The line between feigned retreat and genuine rout is razor thin, but William's knights execute it perfectly. More English warriors, drunk on what they think is victory, surge down the hill in pursuit. Harold's shouts for them to maintain the shield wall are lost in the chaos of battle. For the first time all day, significant numbers of English troops are fighting on level ground, separated from their main force. William's trap snaps shut with devastating efficiency. Norman cavalry wheels and charges into the scattered English pursuers, caught in the open, without their shield wall. Harold's warriors are cut down mercilessly. Hundreds of England's finest fighters die in minutes, their axes useless against mounted opponents. But even this disaster doesn't break Harold's army. The surviving English warriors fall back to their hilltop position and reform the shield wall. For most of the afternoon, the battle becomes a grinding war of attrition. Norman cavalry charges uphill repeatedly, only to be thrown back by English steel. Norman archers send arrow after arrow into the English ranks, but the shield wall adapts, shields raised high to deflect the wooden rain. As the afternoon wears on, both armies begin to show the strain. Norman horses are exhausted from repeated charges uphill. English warriors, fighting defensively for hours, begin to thin as casualties mount. The battle that both sides expected to end quickly has become a test of endurance that neither army is winning. But William has one more tactical innovation that Harold hasn't anticipated: concentrated archery fire at high angle. Instead of shooting directly at the shield wall, Norman archers begin firing high into the sky, letting their arrows fall behind the English shields. It's this change in tactics that begins the final crisis for Harold's army. Arrows falling from above find gaps that direct fire cannot penetrate. English casualties, light throughout most of the battle, suddenly begin to mount. Most crucially, Harold's brothers Gurth and Leofwine fall, struck down by Norman arrows or cavalry. The death of Harold's brothers marks the beginning of the end. The English king, who has led from the front all day, now fights not just for victory but for survival. Around him, the shield wall begins to fray as exhaustion and casualties take their toll. Late afternoon, October 14th, 1066. The Battle of Hastings has raged for nearly 8 hours, far longer than anyone expected. Both armies are exhausted, but William can see that the English shield wall is finally beginning to crack. Harold Godwinson stands beneath his banners at the center of the English line, his armor dented, his axe stained with Norman blood. Around him, his surviving housecarls maintain their grim defense, but their numbers have been halved. The king who won the greatest victory of his reign just 3 weeks ago is about to fight his last battle. William launches what he knows must be his final assault. Every remaining Norman knight, every surviving archer, every foot soldier still capable of fighting advances up Senlac Hill. This isn't just another attack, it's the death ride of the Norman army. Either the English line breaks now, or William's invasion fails. The final assault hits the English position like an avalanche. Norman cavalry charges straight into the shield wall, while archers maintain their deadly rain from above. English axes rise and fall desperately as Harold's warriors fight with the fury of men who know they're facing extinction. In the chaos of this final melee, Harold Godwinson dies. How exactly is one of history's great mysteries. Norman sources claim he was struck in the eye by an arrow, the price of his broken oath paid in the most symbolic way possible. English chronicles suggest he was cut down by Norman swords, dying as a warrior should with his weapon in his hand. Later legends blend both stories, saying he was wounded by an arrow and then butchered by Norman knights. But the manner of Harold's death matters less than its consequences. When the dragon banner of England falls, when Harold Godwinson breathes his last, the Anglo-Saxon kingdom dies with him. The shield wall that has protected England for centuries finally breaks. The surviving English warriors, leaderless and surrounded, are systematically destroyed. By evening, the field at Hastings is carpeted with English dead. Harold's body is so mutilated that it can only be identified by marks known to his mistress. The last Anglo-Saxon king of England has become an unrecognizable corpse on a field that will forever bear the name of his Norman conqueror. William of Normandy stands victorious on Senlac Hill as darkness falls. Around him lie the bodies of an entire civilization. The Anglo-Saxon nobility, earls, thanes, and housecarls, who traced their lineages back centuries, have been virtually exterminated in a single afternoon. The England that existed that morning will never exist again. But William's victory comes at a terrible cost. His own army has been devastated. Thousands of Norman, Breton, and French knights lie dead beside their English opponents. The survivors are too exhausted to pursue the fleeing English forces. William has won his battle, but he still needs to win his kingdom. The transformation of England begins immediately. Within days, Norman castles start rising across the English countryside, stone monuments to foreign conquest. Within months, Norman nobles are granted English lands, displacing Anglo-Saxon families that have held them for generations. Within years, the English language itself begins to change, as Norman French mingles with Anglo-Saxon speech. But the deepest change is in the very nature of English kingship. Harold Godwinson was the last king to rule with the consent of the Witenagemot, the last to embody the Anglo-Saxon ideal of the warrior king who fought beside his men. William rules by right of conquest, establishing a feudal system that makes every acre of English soil ultimately his personal property. The Battle of Hastings doesn't just change who rules England. It changes what England is. The island kingdom that has successfully resisted Roman legions, Viking raids, and Danish conquest finally falls to Norman knights. But in falling, it becomes something unprecedented. A hybrid civilization that blends Anglo-Saxon tradition with Norman efficiency, Germanic law with Frankish feudalism, English poetry with French architecture. October 14th, 1066. A single day, 8 hours of battle, 1 arrow or 1 sword stroke, ending 1 life. Yet the consequences ripple across centuries. The Norman conquest doesn't just replace one king with another Mayan. It rewrites the genetic and cultural DNA of an entire nation. Norman nobles intermarry with Anglo-Saxon survivors, creating a new aristocracy. Norman architects build cathedrals that still dominate English skylines. Norman administrators create government systems that evolve into Parliament itself. Most profoundly, the conquest makes England European in a way it has never been before. Under the Normans, England becomes a major player in continental politics, launching crusades, fighting the 100 Years' War, eventually building a global empire. The insular Anglo-Saxon kingdom transforms into outward-looking England. Yet Anglo-Saxon England doesn't disappear entirely. Common law, parliamentary tradition, and the English language itself preserve elements of the civilization that died at Hastings. The England that emerges from the Norman conquest is neither fully Anglo-Saxon nor completely Norman, but something entirely new, a fusion culture that becomes one of history's most dynamic civilizations. Harold Godwinson's death at Hastings marks the end of one England and the birth of another. The warrior king, who should have been celebrating his greatest victory instead, becomes the last representative of a world that vanishes with his final breath. But his defeat creates the conditions for achievements he could never have imagined. Gothic cathedrals, Magna Carta, Shakespeare's plays, global exploration, industrial revolution, parliamentary democracy. The arrow that kills Harold Godwinson, if arrow it was my say, becomes one of history's most consequential projectiles, changing not just England but ultimately the entire world. From a single battlefield in Sussex, the ripples spread across oceans and centuries, shaping nations that wouldn't exist for hundreds of years, influencing events that wouldn't occur for thousands. October 14th, 1066. The day that changed everything. The day England died and was reborn. The day a bastard duke became a conqueror and a kingdom became an empire. The Battle of Hastings is over. The story of England has just begun.